Right now, my advice to people is do not sell your HODL position, only buy the dips. Ripple is one of those coins that really, really bothers me. Ripple was always a scam coin. I got rid of everything by 2015. By 2015, I realized that everything else in the crypto space is total nonsense. And the only cryptocurrency that matters is Bitcoin.
So, as we can see, the global economy is in a tough place right now, and analysts have different opinions on how it's going to develop. So, I'm wondering what your personal thoughts are on the situation. What should we expect from the global market? And do you think this quarantine was a good decision?
This is going to be a little tricky. Let's start with the quarantine. I think the quarantine was not a great decision. I think this could have been handled a lot better. I think way too many small businesses will be going bankrupt. I think the disruption to the supply chain will be dangerous. And I think that more people will be hurt by staying home. I personally think that people should have been warned. Maybe if you're older, you should have stayed home. If you can work from home, you should work from home. But shutting down the entire global economy will probably have long-term horrible ramifications. At the moment, I think the economy is in trouble. The stock market has rebounded really nicely, giving you the impression that nothing is wrong, but I don't trust it. I still think the stock market will also pull back. But even if it doesn't, that won't mean that there aren't going to be major problems over the next few years. Unemployment will shoot up drastically. And the worst thing about it is the potential for civil unrest in multiple ways. If they keep the lockdown too long, people will get frustrated and not only start being angry and violent against each other, they can start being violent against the authorities that are locking them away, which would only mean more aggression towards the people by the authorities and the governments. And that's not a good place. That's not where you want the world to go. Potential for conflicts between nations like Russia and China, and I'm sorry, I like the US and China and not Russia and China. Potential for conflicts between US and China and maybe other nations as well. So there's just so many bad things that can happen out of this. And I know it sounds bad that we did it to save a few lives, but where does it end? Like, do you stop people from driving cars because more people die in cars than from anything else? So it should have been maybe shut down for a couple of weeks until you realize that it could be handled without the full-blown, this tyrannical shutdown of arresting people for going to the beach just by themselves. It's getting crazy.
Yeah, I agree with you. So what about Bitcoin price then?
And that's also one of the big wild cards. This shutdown due to coronavirus is taking place at the 4-year Bitcoin halving. So it's really hard to judge whether some of the fluctuations in the price of Bitcoin are related to the halving versus being related to the current economic environment. And both of them have an effect on Bitcoin, of course. What we witnessed a few months ago was the big crash in the price of Bitcoin that probably had a lot to do with the shutdown and the stock market crash and people being concerned and needing to feed their family because they're about to lose their jobs. So all of these are serious concerns that probably led to Bitcoin dropping further than it should have. And right now, we're watching Bitcoin go back above 9,000. Probably has to do with the hype of the halving that is probably driving Bitcoin a little bit higher than it should be. So both of them are playing a role. I do think that Bitcoin is near the top of its bounds at the moment and will probably pull back short term, While at the same time, I think that Bitcoin has ended its bear market, and over the next 4 years, we're only going to be going up.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it will go down right after the halving, or when?
I don't know when. Timing is always tricky. I think Bitcoin could start to drop any day. I thought it already did start to drop a few days ago when we hit that 9,400 mark and fell down to 8,500. I thought we would go a little bit lower. Perhaps we're going to have one more swing up into the halving and then drop afterwards. It's also possible we're not going to drop at all. Right now, my advice to people is do not sell your HODL position, only buy the dips. If you have an additional leveraged long-term positions, yeah, that you need to take profit on those. I took profit on my short-term trade to the upside of Bitcoin when Bitcoin hit 9,000. Before it even got to 94, I have not gotten back into the market on my short-term trades, but I would never touch my HODL at this point. If anything, I'm trying to see what I can sell over the next 6 months or so to try and acquire more Bitcoin.
Okay. And how do you see crypto in general, and in particular Bitcoin, as a payment method, like for example Roger Ver does, or maybe more as an investment?
At the moment, I mean, Bitcoin is always both. For me, the way I see it personally is different than the way other people see it. For me, it is not only an investment and not only a payment method. For me, it's a way for me to make a living because people do pay in Bitcoin for my services. One of the reasons why my services exist is for people to pay in Bitcoin, but most people don't pay in Bitcoin. Most people still use the traditional financial system to pay for my goods and services. Me offering Bitcoin as a payment method is not enticing them. They even get a little discount if they pay in Bitcoin, and the majority of the people still want to pay in US dollars or euros, and it just converts right into my bank account. So what Roger Ver wants and what people choose to do are two independent things. You can't force it on anyone, and that's one of the problems. Anyone that thinks that they know better than the general public will always be wrong, and their businesses will always fail. I like using Bitcoin as a means of payment. It's my preferred means of receiving value, and it's also my preferred means of sending value because it's easier than using bank accounts. But at the same time, I want to hold on to as much of my Bitcoin as I can, because the more Bitcoin I hold on to, the more things I can purchase in the future. And a lot of people do think the same way. It's always going to be both. But if you are not capable of saving and holding on to your Bitcoin, you're not going to be buying anything in the future.
Yeah. So you have an extensive trading and analytical background. What got you so interested in crypto?
So I've been trading and working on Wall Street long before I got into Bitcoin. And while I heard about Bitcoin as early as maybe 2011, very early 2011, possibly late 2010, when I heard about it, Bitcoin didn't really have any properties that I really needed at the time. I wasn't that much of a gold bug. I wasn't I wasn't going to be using it to avoid any kind, to give myself privacy in transactions. I didn't really need it. But everything changed in 2013. In April of 2013, when I watched the Cyprus banking shutdown, when the European Union shut down all the Cyprus banks and confiscated 50% of everyone's money in the Cyprus bank accounts above 100,000 euros, that really scared me. And I didn't think something like that could happen in a developed nation, a European nation, United States, Canada, Australia. And that basically changed everything And I started looking for a way to protect the money that I have at the bank, because at the time I was making a really good salary. I do not spend a lot of money. I still drive my 12-year-old car, still live in the same apartment I bought 12, 13 years ago. So I I don't splurge, and I like to save money. And the fear that some government can come and confiscate half of my money because they want to really bothered me. And Bitcoin wasn't the best solution. Bitcoin was the only solution, because storing your gold is also tricky, because how do you protect it? They can always confiscate your gold if they don't like you either, because it has a physical form. Bitcoin had that unconfiscatability feature. And today I own unconfiscatable.com and have a conference called Unconfiscatable, because that was the property that I find most valuable for Bitcoin. And then the other properties that it has is this censorship resistant value transfer. It doesn't really, it's not a big deal how long your payment takes to get there. It's not even a big deal how private that payment is or how expensive that payment was. What's important is this payment will not be stopped. And Bitcoin is the only one in the crypto space or in the world that has a payment that will not be stopped, because I don't believe that the other competitors of Bitcoin or traditional system, there's always somebody that could get in the middle and stop that payment if they want to. Ethereum proved it when they returned the money from the DAO hack. They proved that they can step in the middle and return you your money. Bitcoin is the only one that can so far say that this can't happen. And of course, the final property is the finite supply of Bitcoin, making it hard money. While I wasn't all that crazy on hard money when I first heard about Bitcoin 10 years ago, I'm a little more on it now that I've watched the 2008 financial crisis play out, then more money printing in 2011 to save Europe, and now more money printing for the coronavirus. This property will become important eventually. Maybe not this year, maybe not next year, but by the end of the decade, all of this easy money and handing out checks to people because you've taken away their jobs by shutting down the economy, all of that is going to come back to haunt economics and Bitcoin. I expect Bitcoin to be the winner.
Yeah, maybe you can tell us about your portfolio. What altcoins do you invest in? If it's not a secret, of course.
It's not a secret at all. I don't invest in any altcoins. The only coin that I have is Bitcoin, and that's it. It's the only coin that I've had for over 5 years now. Back when I first joined the space in 2013, sure, I had some Litecoin, and I had some of the other ones at the time, Darkcoin, which rebranded, and maybe 2 or 3 others. I had a little bit of those. I got rid of everything by 2015. By 2015, I realized that everything else in the crypto space is total nonsense. And the only cryptocurrency that matters is Bitcoin. Sure, this other stuff could outperform it for a short period of time, but ultimately it's irrelevant. There's always a Google competitor that will move from less than $1 a share to $3 a share, but ultimately they're not going to challenge the Google price. Same thing with Amazon. There's always some online retailer or some cloud service provider that you could invest in, and you can double or triple your money from half a dollar to $2 or $3 a share. But it's not going to challenge something like Amazon. So to me, that's what Bitcoin is. It doesn't really have any challengers in the long term, just short term. And if you want to trade that stuff in an unregulated environment to make yourself more Bitcoin, that's great. All the power to you. I teach people how to trade. I don't encourage trading because it's so dangerous. But if you know how to trade, you can trade any asset you like. But as long as you are aware that you are trading in something that doesn't actually have a long-term future. And I never have a problem with people trading what I refer to as shit coins or scam coins. It's when these people go on social media and try to promote them as something that they are not in order for them to profit from the positions in those coins. That I take serious offense to, and I constantly call those people out.
Okay. According to your tweets, you're a big opponent of XRP and Ripple. Can you please tell us what makes you think that it's a scam?
Sure. Ripple is one of those coins that really, really bothers me. Ripple was always a scam coin. Now, Ripple, the company, had existed before Bitcoin even existed. But then one of the probably five biggest scammers in the space, named Jeb McCaleb, who created Mt. Gox and sold it to Mark Karpelès with 80,000 missing Bitcoin, decided to come to the Ripple Corporation, basically, and convince them in creating the Ripple token. They created 100 billion of these tokens out of thin air. They still hold more than half of them. They, in my non-legal opinion, broke all types of security laws. I consider Ripple a security of the Ripple Corporation. It is not a cryptocurrency. It has nothing to do with the cryptocurrency. It is not decentralized by any means. It was a way for that company to finance its operation by first giving away this Ripple token to the general public, then hyping it up with statements that try to convince people how much it's going to go up in value, which again breaks all kinds of security laws, and there's lots of evidence for this. Ripple is going through its court case now to identify whether it is or isn't a security. I hope Ripple loses that court case, and I hope that the C-level management is held liable. And I don't know if jail is the right answer here, but perhaps taking away all their money is the answer, because what they've done is actually, in my view, very illegal, and we have 100 years of financial laws to prevent these kinds of scams. They made up a reason for the existence of this token. You don't need a currency in the middle in your currency conversions. If you are converting your US dollars to, say, the Filipino peso, which is a big remittance corridor, you don't need a crazy made-up token in the middle to convert your dollars into ripples and then ripples into the Filipino peso. You just need better database technology to convert the US dollar directly into the peso in a more efficient way. So the entire Ripple token only exists to enrich the corporation of Ripple, and that bothers me, and that always bothered me. And hopefully the Ripple well, at first the Ripple token needs to go away. If Ripple, the company, existed without the token, I would have no problem with it. One of Ripple's competitors is R3, and they never had a scammy token. So I don't really have a problem with that company. So hopefully not only the Ripple token goes away in the future, but so does the Ripple Corporation itself.
Okay. What suggestions do you have for people who want to become traders and or investors? Where should you start if you're a beginner?
Well, they're a little bit different. An investor is someone that doesn't pay attention to every single minute of the value of their asset that they happen to put money in. A trader is someone that's short term. Trading is more of a job. It's more of a full-time thing. Now, there's also ways in between. Lots of people still trade while having a full-time job. So they just have to have a longer time horizon in doing so. When it comes to investing, you want to do as much fundamental analysis as you can. For example, if you are an investor in the, if I am as an investor in the crypto space, the only thing I would actually invest in is Bitcoin. I don't think any other cryptocurrency is worthy of investment. Now, do you want to invest in companies in the crypto space? Well, the first question you got to ask is, will this company outperform the price of Bitcoin? If you feel that this company will outperform the price of Bitcoin, then you perhaps may be willing to invest in that company. I have not done very well investing in the companies in the crypto space. So at the moment, I only stick to investing in Bitcoin itself and no other cryptocurrency. When it comes to trading, you have to learn how to trade. It's almost like going to be a professional poker player without actually learning how to play poker properly. You're not going to have a chance. If you think you're just going to start trading without any kind of education, you're going to get crushed. Now, you don't necessarily have to pay for that education. You could, just like with poker, you can become a professional poker player by reading a few books, watching a few videos, but you kind of get what you pay for. And now, again, just like poker, you don't know who's good or who's not good, who is honest and who's a scammer to learn from. So you end up just absorbing as much free education as you can. And that's fine too. But if you think you're going to be a trader without any kind of education on trading, you're going to be in trouble. And the lower your time frame is, the less fundamental analysis and research play into it. I'm a big believer in technical analysis, and I believe that the only way to short-term trade profitably is to understand technical analysis. And I have a free tutorial on my website. I do have webinars that I charge for, but to me, it starts with education. If you're going to be a trader, you have to understand it. Otherwise, you're just going to complain how trading is terrible and how everyone is stealing all your money and how it's manipulated. If you're going to complain that it's manipulated and they're there to steal your money, then don't trade. Then you need to find another profession. So that's my only advice to those that are considering trading or investing.
Okay, and I love this question. What is the biggest mistake you've ever made trading?
I mean, there's many mistakes I've made trading. That's why I've come up with the Tone Vays 3 rules of trading. These are the 3 rules that I mention all the time during my educational webinars. My rule number 1 is I don't add to losing positions. If I enter into a trade and that trade starts to lose me money, I don't make that trade worse. I don't add more money into a losing trade. That's my rule number 1. I've broken that rule too many times in my early career of trading. So I had to implement that as rule number 1. There are very minor exceptions to all of these rules, but the exceptions are minor under very specific conditions. My rule number 2 is I do not remove my stop losses. If I enter into a trade and I have an idea of at which point am I going to admit that this trade was a mistake, I have to get out of that trade. I shouldn't. The following thinking is no good. Saying, "Hey, I'm gonna have a feeling, and I'm not gonna get out of this bad trade just this one time," because that usually just makes it worse and worse and worse. And rule number 3: once you have some profit on a trade, once your trade has become sufficiently profitable, I take some profit off that trade, but I absolutely set a break-even stop loss. If I enter into, let's say, if I enter into a trade to the upside on Bitcoin and I buy Bitcoin at 9,000 and Bitcoin goes up to 92 or 9,300, and I even start thinking, you know what? I'm making pretty good money on this trade. The moment I start thinking that I'm making good money on the trade, I immediately raise my stop loss to above my entry. So if Bitcoin crashed while I'm asleep, it gets me out without the loss of my principal. Because one of the things that used to kill me mentally was watching my profitable trades become losing trades. I don't let the market do that to me anymore. So once a trade is profitable, I want to at least set a break-even stop loss. If I don't make any money on it, that's okay. But losing money on a profitable trade is terrible. So once I corrected those 3 general mistakes, I became a much, much, much better trader.
Okay, I have only one last question. What will the Bitcoin price be at the end of 2020, in your opinion, of course?
So we are rising right now quite a bit, and I am expecting Bitcoin to pull back. So for the entire, since I wrote my article on January 3rd or January 4th, just as the year was starting, and I wrote an article about my 5 top things I'm expecting for Bitcoin. And what I wrote in that article on my blog, I have not changed my mind. I still think Bitcoin will be approximately $10,000 at the end of the year, but just below it. So somewhere between 8,000 and 11,000 is where I'm expecting Bitcoin to be at the end of the year. But if we break out above 10,500 this month and actually hold that $10,000 level, I will probably have to raise that outlook. But right now, that's still my outlook.
Okay. Thank you so much, Tone. It was very interesting. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Rima.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.